90s, on occasion, out of the blue, the telephone would ring, and it was Reb Zalman. Level, he would say, in his resonant deep voice. And in the millisecond between hearing my name and his next words, I was sure that he had something really special he wanted to tell me. An important assignment. He was going to confide in me. I really got excited and a little nervous. Then I heard, I'm coming to Boston next week. Can you pick me up at the airport? Mundane as it seemed at first, I learned that this was one way you got to spend time with him. I always learned something, an expression, a midrash, a twist on liturgy, ideas about how to do B'nai Mitzvah. 1978, I was 28 years old. There he was telling Hasidic stories at the Footlight Club at Jamaica Plain. If not for my then girlfriend Joyce, now my wife, almost 35 years, I wouldn't have gone to this event, sponsored by the Sufi Center in JP. We were both interested in Jewish spirituality and looking for connection. The evening with Reb Zalman moved me to tears. Tears of grief that I'd never heard these stories before, of longing to find my place in Jewish life, and of hope that I had finally met someone who might help me find my way. My father always told me that as a little boy, he and his cousins would sit under their grandfather's Shabbos table and listen to stories of the Baal Shem Tov. Sadly, he didn't remember any of the stories. That night, Reb Zalman restored to me a connection to these stories and became my father in Jewish spirituality. If not for that evening, I wouldn't have called Zalman the following week and said, I want to learn, what should I do? He suggested a number of books, including one by our teacher Art Green, Your Word is Fire, and connected me to the right teachers. I began to study with them in my spare time. In the meantime, eager to begin some kind of Jewish practice, a group of friends began meeting in our living rooms, exploring Shabbat and holidays and our personal and spiritual connections to Judaism. Some lit Shabbat candles and Hanukkah menorahs for the first time. Reb Zalman had taught us that each of us is a Kohen Gadol. So the following Yom Kippur, we meditated the Avodah service. Here we were locating that holiest of selves inside and taking him or her into the Holy of Holies within us. This was revolutionary, mind-blowing, and very heart-opening. If we had an inner Kohen, then we must have an inner Moshe and an inner Pharaoh. And so learning in the psycho-spiritual dimension began. The living room grew to larger spaces. Reb Zalman and I began having phone conversations about creating a satellite community, a B'nai Or satellite community in Boston. And in September of 1982, Reb Zalman came up from Philly. In his own inimitable fashion, through liturgy, he inaugurated our young and growing community. And we became part of the B'nai Or Religious Fellowship, which was the forerunner of Aleph. He deployed me as the spiritual director of the community, and some years later honored me by deputizing me as a rabbinic pastor. As far as I know, I'm not sure, but as far as I know, this is a title only given by Reb Zalman. Reb Zalman influenced and taught so many people, as Rav Claudio was saying, who taught people and on and on. I learned ritual from him. I was lucky enough to serve as his musician on a number of occasions, and I took everything in. The ability to perform the multitude of services, weddings, life cycle rituals that I led over close to 20 years, I owe all to Reb Zalman. He led us in our first Shabbaton, hosted at a member's home in Alston many years ago. He invited me upstairs before Shabbat. He said, come upstairs, we'll have a l'chaim. Never having had a l'chaim with Reb Zalman before, I thought we were going to drink whiskey. After reciting the bracha over spices, he lit a joint. What a lovely surprise. He was full of surprises, always an innovator. Say the Shema 3 or 4 times and inserting our names in place of the word Yisrael. Dyadic davening in Hebrew and English at the same time. Use your bodies to pray. Judaism is not a consumer religion. We all need to be producers. It's okay to laugh, it's okay to cry during services. weave the four worlds together, doing, feeling, knowing, and being. He empowered many of us to do R&D, research and development with liturgy, and there was an explosion of new songs and reinterpretation. This we all got from Zalman. My story is emblematic of the thousands that Reb Zalman touched. We were a generation of spiritual seekers, many of us uncomfortable in our home traditions. In our home tradition, having grown up in post-war rational Judaism, so much of the spiritual tradition had been lost in the Shoah, or even earlier when our grandparents and parents, upon coming to America, rejected it. The synagogue offered us little or nothing. His Rebbe had deployed him to turn the hippies on to Judaism. Looking around, I imagine that most of us in this room were perfect targets and happy to be struck and turned on by any of the myriad arrows in his Jewish quiver. Wherever you may have encountered Reb Zalman, you were moved and inspired. He wanted to be remembered as a midwife. He midwifed many thousands into a closer connection to Judaism. He was brilliant. He appeared in our world at just the right time, the perfect shaliach, madrich, guide, to bridge the worlds of Hasidic Europe and the Jewish baby boomers. He told me not very long ago that he wanted to build a ramp into the synagogue. The metaphor being that those of us for whom shul life was close to the last thing we wanted would slowly make our way up the ramp and into the synagogue. But he said, most folks wanted to hang out on the ramp. In other words, we liked the feel-good stuff, but didn't want to do the work of learning Siddur, Talmud, and Torah. He was an amazing Rebbe, mentor, and teacher for all of us, even if you never had the pleasure of being in the same physical space. We can all be grateful for the gifts he gave us. For those of us still on the ramp, we can honor his memory through learning and tzedakah. I will be forever grateful for his midwifery, his teaching, and influence. May his work continue through all of this, through all of us, and may his memory be a blessing always. Amen.
I'd like to do a teaching this afternoon from one of Reb Zalman's books. It's titled Ishmaru Da'at, Guardians and Protectors of Knowledge. Lev mentioned that not everybody wanted to do the hard work of study. A lot of Reb Zalman's writings were connected to the Sefer barrier. Most of the writings were for those who weren't able to enter into the holy texts of our ancestors. But some of his writings, including Ishmaru Da'at, were addressed to those who couldn't escape the holy writings. And he wanted to give them an access ramp into Jewish renewal. And so in his honor, I'd like to do a teaching, page 39. We don't have enough copies for everybody, so please share with your seatmates. If you don't have, please raise your hands, and if people have together, if you could hand them back so that they can be redeployed to somebody who needs it. So two of Reb Zalman's important contributions were in the area of davening, tefillah, and in giving people the autonomy to have their own chidushot, their chidushim, that revelation is a continuing process, and it's a democratic one. And so the writings, he uses the style, he says in the English foreword, of the Beis HaMedrash, ancient Hebrew and Aramaic texts. And he follows the example of one of our writers, Rashi. When Rashi wanted to explain a word, he would use a similar word in French. And so in this text, when Reb Zalman wanted to explain a word, he used Yiddish. And The writings would follow the structure of the parshot of the Torah that were read each week. The Torah is divided into 54 portions, and the different rabbis would explain different parts, and it would be organized along the lines of the parshot. And so this coming week, we started reading Saturday Mincha time, Parshat Va'etchanan, and I'd like to do two of Reb Zalman's teachings. The first is at the bottom right-hand column, going on to the second column, and it's titled Va'etchanan El Havaya. And I pleaded to God Va'et Hahi Lepor at that time, saying, so how do we understand Va'etchanan? I pleaded Va'et Palel, I prayed. And Reb Zalman explains this is in the tense, in the grammar tense of Behipayel. And then he gives a Yiddish explanation as to how to understand Va'et Palel. So hat sich von mir arois gedavent. It's as if the prayers just burst out of me. Af b'lo yodim, even without knowing, hayta tefilati miparetet mimeni. That my prayer just flew out from me. B'bechinat va'ani tefilati, from the way of understanding that I am my prayer. Af shelo hayiti ad b'bechinat az v'ched b'binkomo, even though I wasn't at the time in the state of joy in my place, or in God's place. Ela nichnas, nichna b'shafel berach, I was bent over and low at the knees in my eyes. Even at that low point, I couldn't stop myself from davening. It says in Kohelet, L'chol zman va'et, l'chol chafetz. At every time and place, every time, there is a place for everything. Ve'et l'daber, there's a time for speaking. Ve'et l'shot mi'ledaber, and a time to stop from speaking. And he quotes Va'atem Tacharishun from Shmot, when we are facing the Egyptians and the sea, where do we run? And people are complaining, why are we left Egypt? So the text says, Moshe told them that you should be quiet. So we have a time, as it says in Kohelet, a time to be quiet. But even though we're quiet, does it really mean we don't pray? And Zalman quotes, Aval be'emet kfar amar David HaMelech. In truth, already David HaMelech, alav v'shalom, stated, Sha'afilu be'et lachshot miladaber. I'm sorry. Sha'afilu be'et lachshot miladaber, even in times when we're not speaking, Avar he'et Hashem, b'chol eit, tamiti lajo b'fi, that in Tehillim, it says, I will praise God at every time, and I will praise God continuously with my words. Shem Shem Avorhim Atov Ameti. And so give an explanation, even when you're low, how is it that you pray? So even when we say the bracha, Atov Ma'ameti, good times, Medayin Emet, sad times when we hear sad news, Tamiti, Latov Afi, at all times, God's praise is in my mouth. Afilu, Be'et Shehi Shemitzat HaSeichel, even at times when rationally, Lo Hayaz Ezman Eit Ratzon, it's not a pleasing time for prayer. Mikol Makom, Solat Sich an mir eingehoben, mitchinan zu sein, that I'm still drawn given over to engage in communication with you. Lachein lemor, lo rak bilachisha, not even in silence, ela b'dibur peh, using my mouth out loud, kasicha beino leben kono, like in a conversation between me and my Creator. So this is the teaching of Va'etchanan, and just as an example, I want to cite another section of Va'etchanan, the Shema. Shema Yisrael, and as Lev mentioned, we try and see ourselves in this Shalom Eloheinu Adonai Echad. So we can voice the words, but are we answered? And I think that we can understand the Shema in a way that we are answered. That if we really, that if we really love God with all of our inners, with all of our most, then we will be able to see the Nitzutz Elohim, the divine image, in every other human being. And if we can then engage and spread our love to every other human being, that love then will come back from them to us. And that's how we can hear God's answer to us. I'd then like to go to the other teaching in terms of the continuing revelation and autonomous and democratic revelation to the third column in the page, the right-hand column on page 40. Lo tosifu al hadavar v'lo tigru mimenu. Don't add on to it and don't take away from it. So historically, this was understood as saying, revelation is over. You can't add anything to it, and you shouldn't take away anything to it. And Rabbi Zalman shows that there's another way of understanding that phraseology. Moshe Rabbeinu alav Shalomi, our ancestor and teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu, on his peace, Amar kasher timseru davar bishmi, when you're giving over something in my name, lo tosifu ala davar asher anochi mitzaveh lemor davar bishmi shelo amartiv. So the direction not to add to it isn't that you can't have your own chidushim, that you can't add to the insights, to the revelations that we've already had. But don't put them in my name. Don't say that they come from me. Af shal pi shekol ma shetalmi vatik atid lohorot kvar niten lebikinat Moshe. Even though, in one sense, all of the chidushim that we will ever have in the future come from Moshe Rabbeinu. Aval Masha lo amar Moshe be'atzmo, what Moshe himself did not say, ve'atalmid havati chidish, and the venerated Talmid is the one that is giving this new insight be'atzmo. Timsuru bishmo shalom chadish. You should pass on in terms of the one who actually had the insight, who renewed the word of Torah, Shehu Chidush Uvir, that he gave the Chidush, and he gave the explanation, V'hisir et klipa, and Rabbi Zalman goes on to say that what's this Chidush doing? It's removing the klipa, me'al Torah shechidush. So it was always there, but it was hidden. And the new Talmud is the one who is removing the shell so that we can all benefit from the new insight. Omer davar bishmo, and one who is saying something in the name of the teacher, maybe geula la'olam. So when you cite the person who had the chiddush in the first place, you are bringing redemption and salvation to the world. Umisha tola be'ilan hachi gadol be'Moshe Rabbeinu masha lo amar az lahefech mishabe b'nei adam. But if you say something and you say it's in the name of Moshe Rabbeinu, and that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't say himself, quite the opposite. Instead of being redemption and salvation to the world, you are bringing slavery to human beings. How can we understand that? And I'll just go on a little more with the text. Gam lahefech, misha omer davar b'shem Moshe, raya mehemna de omer rak chatzi hadavar hainu et. So whoever says something in the name of the real person who gave the insight, but doesn't give the full text, only gives a portion of it. And he gives the example from Dvarim. Shamru lachem penivta levavchem. So be careful that you shouldn't turn your heart away. Ve'ino omer, and you don't say the rest of the phrase, Kimei hashamayim al haaretz, that you will be able to renew the grace of heaven on earth. Whoever al lotigru. So if you say only a portion of what the original speaker said and not the whole thing, then you are violating the commandment of lo tigru, don't take away. Ki dvar Moshe bishleimutam HaTorah. The words of Moshe in their entirety, in their completeness, are the Torah. Be'apashta de Moshe dechol dara v'dara and also the people who followed in Moshe from every generation. Not to take away the second part, the context, the completeness. V'shivim panim laTorah. And if we put the statement in its entirety and not in its limitations, then we will not be enslaving people, because by saying something in the name of Moshe that Moshe didn't say, then people will give credit to that as if it's coming from Moshe as opposed from yourself, and will feel that they are limited by it, in some way enslaved by it, and that's not what Moshe said. So again, to give some context from the Parsha always also has the Ten Commandments, the Aseret HaDibrot. Why does it need to be there twice? In part, the benefit of it being there twice is that it gives us flexibility to again play with the words and understand it in a more complete and deeper way. And one example is in the fifth commandment in terms of Shabbat. In Shmot, in Exodus, it says, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat l'kadshah, remember the day of the Sabbath to keep it holy. And in Devarim, it says Shamor et Yom HaShabbat l'kadshah, that you have to actually guard and keep the day of Shabbat. So what's the difference? And I think that in Devarim, in Mishnah Torah, when we are recognizing Moshe's last days, and when we are now recalling Reb Zalman's last days, that there's an important difference, that it's upon us not to just remember, but to actually be active and be involved ourselves, both in terms of observing Shabbos, but also in rejuvenating the words of Torah so that they are meaningful to our lives today. And one thing that jumps out at me in terms of the difference between Shmot and Devarim in terms of the rationale for keeping Shabbos. In Shemot we keep Shabbos because it's a remembrance to creation, and that's important to remember, that we all have the same Creator, and we are all created in the divine image. But Devarim tells us to go further than that, and to remember Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim, the importance of being free, of escaping narrow spaces, of treating our servants and the stranger in the same way that we want to be treated ourselves. And hopefully that by engaging in this kind of rejuvenation of the Word of Torah, this continuing revelation that is a democratic revelation, that we will be able to not only avoid, in the words of Rabbi Zalman, being mishabed b'nei adam, making them enslaved, but hopefully we will help everybody be free, and in that way we can live in shleimut and in peace.
For those who don't have a program, and Baruch Hashem, we printed 100, and Baruch Hashem, there are more than 100 here, as you can see. So this was Reb Schachter, who is Reb Zalman's son, and I'm introducing Matya Schachter, who is Reb Zalman's grandson.
So I neither the skill nor the comfort to sing in public the way that my Zadie did, so I'm going to ask you to please sing along with me. Kol halam kula gesher sar me'od, gesher sar me'od, gesher sar intellectuals and those more marginally connected to their Yiddishkeit is a fitting opening for a speech about my Zaidi, as he was equally comfortable walking into any of these venues and teaching his fellow Jews there. But I'm really drawn to the quote because Zaidi was a metaphorical bridge builder and bridge crosser in all of his life's work. He was a bridge between different branches of Hasidim, between Judaism that predates the Shoah and the formation of the State of Israel and the Judaism that followed these twin transformational events, between denominations of Judaism, between different religions, between the religious and the secular, between spirituality and technology, between genders, and between generations. While the public was able to see my grandfather as a great man and influential leader, one of Newsweek's most influential rabbis, he was also my Zaidi. And in that role, an example stands out to me about how he could be a bridge between different generations. One day, 13 years ago, during the Shiva for my grandmother, my Zaidi took turns sitting one at a time with each of his grandchildren, discussing with us any of the big issues or questions that we were struggling with. All of the cousins were allowed to silently observe these discussions when it wasn't our turn. My cousins and I represent a very diverse spectrum of religious, spiritual, and secular values, and yet Zaidi was able to sit with each of us and connect on a level that made sense for each person. He could quote Shas and a diversity of Achronim, for example, in his discussions with his Haredi grandchildren, and then discuss technology or physics with those of us pursuing studies in these fields. This memory stands out to me as an example of how he not only had an eclectic knowledge base and mastery of a broad range of subjects, but he also had the personal awareness to know how to best reach and connect with each of us, by selecting specific arguments or stories that would hold the most meaning or value for each person. I'm in awe with how he was always able to reach his grandchildren, no matter the gap in age or life experience. One of the aspects of my relationship with Zaidi that I cherish most, and that I'm going to miss now the most now that he's gone, is the process of working on Divrei Torah with him. For years, I had delivered a Dvar Torah in my synagogue in Cambridge on the high holidays. I would spend many Sunday mornings each summer with him on the phone or on Skype getting his input and feedback. And he always insisted that I attribute his teachings not as Reb Zalman or by his formal title, but as Zaidi. When I got married in 2008, my family and I had the good fortune of my Zaidi being able to travel to Philadelphia to attend the Oprah wedding. I had many beautiful memories from the entire weekend, including the dramatic entrance he made into shul on Friday evening in his Shlomo and Kapota, the teachings he shared about the liturgy of Kabbalat Shabbat and the significance of letting our relationship with friends and loved ones influence our relationship with God and vice versa, singing Zmirot and Nigunim at the various meals, and his wide smile as he picked up the cup of wine and began singing the final blessing of the Shabbat Bracha under the chuppah. 2 months ago, the week before Shavuot, my family was able to spend a little bit of time with my Zaidi. We obviously didn't know it at the time, but this would be our last chance to see him. For that morning, he was really just a loving great-grandfather, bouncing my son on his knee, blessing my then-pregnant wife with an easy delivery, which happened, and singing to his soon-to-be born great-granddaughter. We are so lucky to have had this opportunity. In his work titled Ein Yaakov, Rabbi Yaakov Ibn Chaviv cites a debate amongst the rabbis as to the most important verse in the Torah. Two of the answers given are particularly famous. Rabbi Akiva is known to have taught a student that the entirety of the Torah can be summed up by the line, "And you shall love your neighbor as yourself." Nevertheless, when he was being tortured by the Romans and about to die, our tradition teaches that Rabbi Akiva actually recited a different verse, the first line of the Shema. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one." If the 613 mitzvot can be categorized as those between fellow humans and those that are between the individual and God, then these two verses can serve to represent those two categories. However, a third opinion is also cited in the Ein Yaakov. The first sheep shall be offered in the morning, and the second sheep in the afternoon. This verse might seem innocuous, at least for those unconcerned with the physical well-being of the sheep. But I think it conveys a much deeper message. Prior to the destruction of the temple, the sacrifice of one sheep in the morning and one in the afternoon was the fundamental aspect of the Jewish people's connection to God. Day in and day out, rain or shine, happy or sad, on a Tuesday in the middle of February or on Yom Kippur, the sacrifice of these two sheep formed the essence of the bond between the Jewish people and their Creator, between humanity and the world around. Seen in this light, this verse can come to teach us that our spiritual well-being demands daily attention. It is not enough to call out to God in the big moments, on holy days, or on days of personal or national celebration, or when a loved one is ill, or on the anniversary of a funeral. We must do so each and every day. My Zaidi taught me the significance of being able to say Schachter in 20 minutes, including the time it takes to put on tefillin in the beginning, and because otherwise the practice won't be sustainable as a daily activity. Some days I might have the time and the kavanah for proper prayer with a minyan and the full traditional liturgy. But other days, the baby will be crying, the toddler's cereal just spilled on the ground, the trash needs to be taken out, and the deadline at work just can't wait. And this is one of the major legacies he leaves behind for all of us. All of his teachings and innovations that allow each of us to connect with God in our own ways that make sense for us based on what is going on in our lives. Because if we don't make that effort for ourselves on a daily basis, nobody else can do it for us. So he encouraged me to download an app onto my iPhone so that I have a Siddur and all of Tanakh and the Talmud with me when I have 10 minutes on the T or between meetings. And he helped others use meditation, or dance, or teachings, pharmaceuticals, from other spiritual traditions, teachings from other spiritual traditions as their way to come closer to God every morning and every afternoon. The Midrash of Bamidbar Rabbi teaches that there are Shivim Panim LaTorah, 70 faces of the Torah, and my Zaidi worked to make sure everyone was able to find an appropriate path to connect to our traditions and to God.
Miriam Shachter will be reading a psalm, and very happy Miriam came. She came all the way from Medina.
This is an absolutely wonderful book of translations of the Psalms. Very, very useful for each person on his own, with a friend, with a group of people. I highly recommend it. Psalm 30. My intention when I read this to you is to be saying this for Rabbi Zalman and for myself and for each of you. So please let it sink in. I acclaim you, my God. You set me free so that my foes could not gloat at my troubles. Yeah, my God, I pleaded with you. You healed me. Yeah, you lifted me from the pit, from the brink of the grave. You brought me back to life. Join me in my song, fellow devotees. Remembering what is sacred, let's give thanks. For a moment, I felt you angry. Then I felt life and acceptance. Though weeping as I fell asleep, I woke up singing. You, Yah, made my mountain firm. I thought I was safe, that I won't ever stumble. But when you hid your face from me, I panicked. I call to you, Yah, I plead with you, Adonai. What use is there in my death? To go down to ruin? Can dust appreciate you? Can it discern your truth? Listen, Yah, be kind to me. Yah, please help me. You turned my grieving into a dance of reconciliation. You took off my rags and wrapped me in joy. Now your glory is my song. I won't hold back. Yah, my God, I will ever be grateful.
Rabbi Arthur Green, the colleague student, would say Zalman will be talking to some teachers on Tefillah.
Facing the front, I need to look around for a second and just see faces. I need to look around for a second and just see faces of people here, see who knows of Zalman from where and from when, and who remembers times with Zalman. I bet there's nobody here who was in my class at Brandeis when I was a 16-year-old freshman, and Yitz Greenberg invited Zalman to Brandeis for a Shabbaton that kind of began to change my life. I'm one of those people Claudia mentioned who's here because of Reb Zalman. Because of that, because of many, many years of his being my teacher and then a very, very dear friend, introducing my wife Kathy and me many, many years ago, and everything else in my life. I'm also here, of course, for the reason I wish I weren't here, and that is to mourn Reb Zalman. But I decided the right thing to do would be to teach. Zalman was a teacher, and Zalman was more than anything a teacher about tefillah. Prayer was what he cared about more than anything else. If I ask about the central theme of his life, the central theme of his teaching, Other aspects of Judaism, mitzvot, serving God everywhere, serving God through all things, were all very important. But prayer, davening, was somehow the essence for him. I remember a day in Chavarat Shalom in 1968 when somebody was doing something crazy, experimental with the prayer, and whether it was Stravinsky in the background or poetry by E. Cummings or whatever in Schachter. Zalman looked at me and said, "They're going to kill Davening." For all his bold experimentalism, he didn't want anybody to kill Davening. Shalom and Matthew and I did not plan this. We're all talking about Kriyat Shema. I wanted to spend a little time talking about the Shema. And what of this is mine and what of this is Zalman's, I don't know. All of it is mine, but all of it comes from, through, because of Zalman. So you can attribute it either way, as you say, on either side you could go. Zalman was a Chabadnik. And Chabad teaching is that Shema, divine Shema Yisrael, Hashem Eloheinu Hashem Echad, is Yichud HaElah, is the upper form of unity. The upper form of unity means unity. God is one as though the world had never happened, as though creation had never happened. You are the same one you were before the world ever existed. There is only one. There is nothing but the one. Everything else is illusion. Everything else is only a secondary form of existence. You know, in Chabad, they translate that verse that we have in the Aleinu, know this day and set it upon your heart that Hashem is God in heaven above and in the earth beneath. Ein od, there ain't nothing else. That's essential to Chabad teaching. So the Shema represents that. That's the moment where Zalman used to say God is an atheist. Because God is no one to worship. Because in that moment of the Shema, there is no such thing as worship. The Shema is not a prayer. Everything in Tefillah leads up to it. The whole prayer service leads up to it, leads away from it. It's right at the center, and it's not a prayer. It's not addressed to God. It's addressed to Israel. It's addressed to us. It's addressed to the community, to the people around you. You call it out. It's a cry. It's a cry, but it's not a prayer. Because you can't pray in that moment. Because to pray means I and thou. To pray means I'm praying to you. I'm saying something to you, Baruch Atah. And in that moment you can't say that because there is no other. There's only one. That's the moment of Yichud HaElah. That's the moment where everything is one. Right after the Shema you whisper, Baruch Shem Yikod Malchuto L'Olam Va'ed. That's called, blessed be God's name forever and ever. That's called by the time Yichud HaTatah. That's the lower form of unity. That's the unity where everything is one in God, and yet all things exist. All things exist in their oneness as part of God. The unity of God is manifest in every particular thing that exists in the world. But both of those are beyond prayer. Both of those are beyond the possibility of prayer. Because in both of them there is no other. This prayer service is meant to take you to that place. It brings you there, and it takes you away from there. But that's the height. That's the moment when you know, hey, Lord, there's nothing but the one. That's what it's all about. That's the ultimate message. But along the way, we have to say many, many times, Baruch Atah. Baruch Atah, as though I am me and you are you. I'm talking to you. I ask you to hear my prayer. Oh, Zalman, I have many conversations about this, about exactly this question. Of is there another, and can you pray if there's not another, and can you make yourself know there's another, and you step back from the other and into the other, and more ways than I can, more we talk about this in more ways than I can begin to tell you about. The point is, we live in a world that we live in a world that's very important for me to remember that I am me and you're you. And there are borders between us that don't violate. So it's that self that lives in that world that needs to be brought along on the journey. And that's why we begin the service with that language. We begin the real morning service by saying, Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you. I'm speaking to you. I'm opening myself to you. Of course, that word atah for a long time, it's something I wrote for Zalman. I think it was the 60th birthday festschrift. I wrote some commentaries on Tefillah. Maybe it was 60th, maybe it was 70th. I don't remember anymore. I said the word atah is really it's really aleph and tav. And everything was created through the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, so that's really all that exists. So I bring to you all that exists. But when I bring to you aleph and tav and all that exists, it's just the word et, which is a direct object. It's not a subject yet. When I add hey to it, which is the name of God, then it becomes atah. I make it into an atah. I make it into I thou, so that I can speak to you, so I can call upon you and address you. So all through the tefillah we say, you. Like Rabbi Yitzchak said, that just all I want is you, do. So all I want is you, and yet then we come to the moments where we're beyond you. But that moment, it turns out, is surrounded on both sides by love. You come into the Shema with Ahava Rabbi in the morning and Ahavat Olam in the evening, with great love, or with worldly love, also quoting the Tanya. Ahava Rabbi is Ahava, which is beyond any reason or understanding. Amazing love that has no, love that's not explained, that just takes you away. And Ahavat Olam, the evening version of love, is measured love, is love that fits into the world. When you come into the Shema with love, and of course you go out of the Shema with love, right after the Shema you say V'ahavta. Why? Because love is that experience of the world of I thou that's so high and so intimate that it shows us there is a place beyond. It takes us over the bridge from duality into unity. So therefore, all that youing has to come to its climax, the moment of love. And the moment of love where you peer over the I thou and say, we're only one, there's only one here. And that takes you to the moment of the Shema. In that moment of the Shema, you're beyond prayer. You're just there in the one. And then, channel it back into love. Channel it back into love. Begin with the V'ahavta. And the V'ahavta then takes you on a journey. It takes you on a journey through. Takes you on a journey through where you have to go, how you have to live in the world, how you have to walk, how you have to talk, how you have to teach the next generation, how you have to live in times of plenty and times of want. It takes you to the Ahavat Hashem Elokechem. In V'hayim Shemo it says, if you truly listen to the word of the Lord your God, the Ahavat Hashem Elokechem, to love, but it doesn't say lehov, it says the Ahava. The Ahava is different than lehov, it's more than lehov. It's an unusual form of Ahava. I take to mean that it's being in a permanent state of being in love. It's a love that's never consummated, like the love of the Song of Songs. You know, they never finally come together. Because it's an unconsummated love, it's a love that remains on the plane of in love forever. And so Ahavat Hashem Elokechem, to be in that state of love that is always fullness, that is always there. And then on that journey, you also go through dangerous places. You also go through some dangerous places. The Zalman no longer in this world. The best tefillah I know leads us through that into silence, that says those dangerous places silently. And in that silence, a world is spoken somehow of the dangers of the journey you go through, in the journey of carrying that oneness through love back into the world and back into the world of I and thou, how to give that love to real people and real relationships. Until you finally get to that place where Zalman said, you reach heavenly days right here on earth, that wonderful, wonderful translation of the end of Vayim Shemo, Ki mea shamayim al ha'aretz, heavenly days right here on earth. Only two more brief lines from the last paragraph of the Shema. There's more I could add about education and other things, but I'll keep it short. Two more things I have from the last paragraph. Vasul had tzitzit, you make tzitzit. And then it says, Uri'item oto. You look at the tzitzit, Uri'item oto, you see it. But already the Midrash translates Uri'item oto, you see it. You look through the tzitzit and see God. The tzitzit are a way of seeing God. And since Lev, you started with that song, Mitzitz minach harakim, that's the answer. God has made seats minach harakim, God has made seats, God is peering through the cracks in reality into our lives, and we peer through the seats, we peer through the same made seats, we peer through the same cracks between the seats, back in and see the face of God and see the presence of God right here in the world with us on an ordinary day, and just putting our troubles on. The whole purpose of it is in the last line of the Shema. Ani Hashem Elokechem asher hotzeithi etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem elohim. I am Havaya, your God, who takes you out of the land of Egypt. Liot lachem, liot li means to become. I am the one who takes you out of Egypt to become your God. That's what it's all about. Shalomi, it says somewhere else in the Torah, to dwell in your midst, to become your God. God is always in the process of becoming your God. We're always in the process of entering into that relationship. We're never quite at the stage where it's all there, where it's all perfect, where it's all whole, where we know God is our God, where we know our love and devotion is whole. We're always in a state of becoming. So that you want to remember, whatever Egypt I have taken you out of all the many Egypts in your life that God has brought you forth from, of all the many narrow places, the many constricted places, the many lost places in your life that God has brought you out of, it's all for the same purpose, because the one wants to become your God. Thus far, in the name of my dear friend and teacher, I'll add one more thing that I'm going to say. 2 weeks from today, I'm going to be speaking in Boulder, Colorado. They're having a more formal memorial there. I'm going to tell this story there, so I'll end with it in the same way here. I wasn't planning to. Zalman and I were in the kitchen together 25 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I don't remember. Probably our kitchen in Philadelphia, Kath, I'm not sure. And we're cooking something, we're making shabbos. And Zalman suddenly says to me, when you slice onions to make gefilte fish, you slice them horizontally. When you slice onions for anything else, you slice them vertically. It's possible, it's the other way around. Zalman, did I take him seriously? Of course, I mean, Zalman is the font of all Jewish authenticity, so of course I took him seriously. Whether this was a wisdom from his mother or from some other cook in Vienna or from some cook in Crown Heights, I don't know, but this was something, if I asked, what did you learn from Zalman? From slicing that onion, my friends, a lot of tears rise up. May they rise with your tears and the tears of his family and the tears of everyone who remembers of Zalman this day. Come before the Kisei HaKavod, the throne of glory, which exists in a palace that Zalman, along with the Baal Shem Tov, would tell us, of course, is an optical illusion created for you to have an object for your devotion. But Zalman wanted to dwell in that palace. And our tears come to that place and bring peace and bring closing and hold us to the life of a wonderful, full, rich, pleasant teacher.
Rabbi Shalomi, who would like to preface the remarks. Comments we wrote in translation. By the way, our readers actually written the entire book to try to understand what comments we wrote. And don't wait for the film.
I think it's time for Shalomi. It's so perfect, Marissa, when you ran up and said, what brought you here? And I said this. And the connection, of course, that Rabbi Shalomi and Rabbi Machan and Rabbi Arthur, all of us spent hours preparing our remarks together in some heavenly gathering, unbeknownst to ourselves. That the B'Sher that I should be with you here, scooted by Yosef Kotler, and Charna may be here at this point in time, and others from the Davening Leaders Training Institute that just completed in Isabella Friedman, the legacy of beloved Reb Zalman, that Rabbi Marsha prayed and myself, Chazan Jack, and others now began our 15th year of doing that work, training people in the legacy of tefillah and the art of spiritual leadership. And, there's Avi too. I see a bunch of DLTIers and others who are here in this room. So it feels perfect to share that piece provided the possibility here. But on Friday night, we did a tish for Zalman, and the chair which he loved to sit in, and Isabella Friedman now sits up on the stage, not deified, but rather with an invitation to people come and sit and teach from that seat. Because as he taught us, when he got up from the Rebbe's chair and moved one step aside so that everyone could sit in that chair and teach. So that part of his legacy is the teaching, the teacher that he invoked with each of us, not just the teaching. But something I said on the Friday evening was I introduced my remarks at that tish by saying I met Reb Zalman first, not as a Rebbe, but as the father of my dear friends, Shalomi and Marcy. And that it's through that connection of the family, that's why I'm here. Not because there was a shloshim for Reb Zalman and how could I get to it, because there was plenty over the weekend. It was to be with my dear friends, and my extended family who are here to honor all of you. Because as we talk about his legacy, when I first met Zalman in the 80s, it was when he was visiting Shalomi and Marcy for Pesach. I hear you. So that's how I met him. I'm sure he was walking out of the kitchen going, hallelujah! Some contribution such as that. And that began that journey of seeing a man at that stage in life, of having manifested in a certain degree, and thank goodness I remember when he first introduced the fall years of his life and kept on continually having to retire again and again repeatedly. And the December years just came in, kind of sliding into home out of the publisher. When Reb Shlomo died, I think it was a big wake-up call for Reb Zalman. And he saw, do I go down that path, or do I start to create space for others to step in even while I'm still with them? And in many ways that added 20 years of his work that produced so much more in the last little while is part of that legacy of all those collaborations. When you look at all the books there, not too many solo ventures, how we could find, and weave people into that conversation is important. But it's not only his legacy to us as the world, but the modeling, at least as it was imprinted on me, of what does a new paradigm of spiritual leadership imply. The struggling to balance being partner and parent and grandparent and great-grandparent with the face of the world, and try to narrow the gulf between the essence of who one was and what was out in the world, is a path that imprinted itself on me as well. And so when I eventually ended up in Philadelphia and living for the last 2 years that he was there across the street, it was the Kabbalah of laundry. When he would sneak me into his apartment building because I didn't have a washer and dryer, tying the laundry together. And he would talk about those struggles, about what it meant now to fully embody and not just give the teaching over, but to do the repair for Shvirat HaKelim within family and partnership and so on. And so it's that path I want to raise up and honor his children and grandchildren and his partners who are all here as well. Because that for me is a really important piece for us to hold. Otherwise, lest we fall into the shadow zone where we reach only for the light of the teachings but don't embody them in the wrestlings in our own life. And that means that activating as Kabbalah teaches us the relational field too. Not only the sfirot that may dazzle us with their emanation, but as Kabbalah teaches, the first emanation was just sfirot, and they collapsed on themselves as a structure without girding. It was only in the second emanation, which was partsufic, had relational face-to-face dynamics, that structure could be sustained. And that's a gift, I think, that Zalman continues to give us. So many other stories, but those can be left to other times. The last time I spoke to Zalman was, I'm surprised there wasn't a Skype restraining order that eventually was created on his behalf because he was a Skype worker. And unless you had that piece that blocked you from being seen, his was do not disturb, right? But that didn't mean that he couldn't jump in on you if you popped up on his screen. So, the last couple of years were, how's the eye doing? And what's happening at the new synagogue? And what's going on here and there? And those different connections. But the piece I offer here in this theme of tefillah that we have coordinated since time began, and yet is temporal and ethereal at this moment in time, is the Anim Zmirot, the hymn of glory. You refer to Rabbi Arthur to crown of glory, how appropriate. One of Zalman's translations, that he came to me the evening before he and Eve were married and said, can you write some music for this? And I said, sure, he said, for tomorrow, for the wedding. So it was a matter of staying present to what was going to flow through. And this song of love for each other and the song of the divine were not separable. Another important teaching. What does that God word even mean? That word in Old German that means to evoke or bring forward. It's not a noun, as Rabbi Zalman taught us. So it's with each other in these connections and relationships that these teachings will live on. Anim Zmirot, a hymn of glory. Anim Zmirot for every living story. Anim Zmirot, a hymn of glory. So in my mild panic that evening, the way that the music came was I pictured Zalman, and I saw him suddenly as a medieval troubadour, with Eve's long hair coming out the window, and him singing to her at the base of the castle. I chant to please you, I weave you dear songs, for you my soul yearns, for you she longs. Nestle in your palm, her love for you grows. She will not rest until it's you she knows. I look for words to speak your praises. My heart to you is yearning praises. Therefore I will speak the virtues of your name, and garland with excellence the honor of your name. Anim Zmirot, a hymn of glory. Anim Zmirot for every living story. Anim Zmirot, a hymn of your glory. Though I do not see you, still I draw your face, portray your features, name your praise. Our prophets spoke, your servants darkly knew, in symbols and myths they refer to you. When describing your power and declaring your care, of your awesome compassion, they made us aware. It's not your being they could describe, only the way your compassion touches our lives. Anim Zmirot, a hymn of glory.
chronologically a little bit backward, as you heard at the beginning. It's interesting. One of the, someone always used to say, it would be great if every shul wouldn't have to use a siddur. Every shul wouldn't have to use a siddur. They would have a screen in front. And you could have sunsets and sunrises and the words come up, etc. And ironically, now that that is happening with many new sanctuaries with screens that come down and all kinds of fancy stuff, we found here at TBZ that people want to come here to have low tech and not high tech. It's very, very interesting. But you have the opportunity that we didn't have perhaps years and years ago of hearing and seeing Rabbi Zalman on YouTube. And I advise you to just take some time every day for teaching. It's a wonderful, wonderful gift that we have. And there's so much information about Rabbi Zalman available to you. And I put up just a selected bibliography. That bibliography is available online as well. The Yesod Foundation has done a very wonderful job. The Yesod Foundation to find out more about that. When I met Rabbi Zalman 40 years ago, he was 50 years old. He was mamish in his prime. And his job was to take people like myself from traditional Jewish backgrounds and to blow things through our heads, to empty them of the trite, if you will, of the banal, of, if you will, the surface understanding, and go to the deep structure. He was very much into deep structure. That was a big thing that he talked about a lot. He was the Stanislavski of davening. Method davening. And how each of us has to find it, as we heard today from Reb Arthur and heard today from Reb Shalomi, everybody has to find it in his own neshama of how to daven. There is no, there's a famous story about watching the tightrope walker go across the tightrope, and one chassid says, "Oh, I can do that. I'll just write down what he did. Left foot, right foot." and he takes his instruction book and then climbs up to climb over the tightrope, and of course he falls flat on his face, because ultimately, and this is true of tefillah particularly, you can't look at someone else's davening. You have to look to your own davening. We were blessed here in Boston to have Rabbi Zalman here on June 1st for a number of days. He sat right near the chair where you sat there. I showed him TBZ. He had not seen it before because he hadn't been in Boston for quite a while. Daven Mincha here. He was able to bless my children. And I had a premonition, I believe, and I think he had a premonition as well. And how do I know that? Because at the last OLA conference of renewal rabbis, I'm going to read from Rabbi Zalman's words. He gave, if you will, a tzavah, a last will. And he said wonderful things. I can't read it all, it's quite long. But he starts by saying, it's such a wonderful trip that the Rabbi Shalom put me on. I can't tell you how grateful I am for the movie in which I acted in life. It is so amazing. And yet, movies come to an end too. I want to begin with a point that I need to make. I can no longer be the source for you for teaching, even as a source of experience, for experience. My memory doesn't serve me so well, and when I look inside of myself, I see that in my senescence, my attention is greatly occupied with sheer maintenance and self-survival. I've tried to share with you what my teachers did not share with me. Not one of the Rebbes or the Mashpiyim told me that old age was going to be like. And what happens when we really say, please, Al Tazvein, Al Tashvein, do not cast me away at the time of my age. It's very hard to do things alone that I used to do, he says, with alacrity. I don't know if you've ever seen a performance of the Dibuk, Shalansky's very famous play. And there the old rabbi keeps saying, "Oi, I don't have the koyach." And they keep bringing me all of their tzaras. That's a voice that I'm hearing as well. I don't have the koyach. Just a few more remarks. There is one thing that I can still model for you that I hope to do. It is patience with God's process. during my body's infirmities this time in my life. Sometimes I wish it would go a little faster. Sometimes I wish I could put the brakes on and say, no, not so fast. But that's the way it goes. And I have to be patient. Rabbi Shalomi, I'll be patient with you. I made a promise that I'll be satisfied just right the time of my life. Or if Rabbi must be able to be satisfied with the length of my days. Thank you. It is so delicious for me to see how the Jewish mainstream has adopted from us things that we pioneered to shape. Much of what they have taken, they did with less understanding and even less skill. There's a reason for it. They saw what we did from the outside, and in a less conscious way were influenced by it. You see, you like it, you do it. But what happened when they saw? Well, what filled what they saw? The attunement, that they didn't get. They got the chisonis, the outer part of that. But in a less than conscious way, they were influenced by it, and they copied it only in form, without the panemius, the inner attunement. He goes on reflecting on the influences he had, also kidding the crew for saying, yes, he's retired many times, keeps them retired. A little bit like, was it all the time? I remember Sheriff, if you remember. He also insisted that he was not a theologian. We heard it directly from him in January when he Skyped to us at the Kala, if you will, run by the Hebrew College Rabbinical School. He says, I am a pastor. That's why rabbinic pastor for him was like a big madrika, big level, to truly be a pastor. What's make a pastor? Right. To be a pastor is to be able to deal with people in a way that they feel they're protected, that they're in a flock, that all rabbis should feel that. And according to our tradition, Moshe Rabbeinu was picked, I'm not talking of myself, Moshe Rabbeinu was picked, why? To be the Raya Mehemna, the true faithful shepherd, because he had been a real shepherd. The famous Midrash, of course, that he took a little lamb that had run away, which usually you say, no, we lose a couple to the wolves. He said, no, I can't lose even this little one to the wolves. And he goes and he finds it, and he puts it up on his shoulders and walks with it. And at that point, the Rabbi says, oh, this guy maybe can do it. Maybe this guy has the stuff. And as we're reading in the Torah today, of course, he had to overcome the Jews he was dealing with. This day, Zalman continued and said, these days I have become a pusha to eat. I feel much less than being a rebbe. I feel a lot more like an Elta Zeta, a great-grandfather, who all the same is a simple Jew. And I asked you for many years to call me Zeta for a while. And now I've been giving a shofar to blow, so I want to blow a few notes that are important and contain some of my concerns. People have asked me, have you named a successor? When my tour of duty is over, the one who deployed me will find others to deploy. Someone who the Kahal will say yes to, guide us. So I will not name a successor. God has blessed or burdened me with a vision that was in past years, 35 years ahead of the rest of the pack. And now my event horizon has shrunk. And it does certainly not extend after I'm gone. Again, I'm just reading this speaking sword. He asks us, his students, look into the Siddur with an open heart, and you'll see things. One thing that gave me such joy, I was saying, Hineni Nuchon Mezumah. And then I got it. I am making myself present. And I say, Ani Muchan. I'm saying Cain, I'm saying yes to what's about to come. And I thank you, Rabbi Shalomi, for having invited me. He named me, I make myself present. I make myself positive. And I feel I'm not talking to the wall. There is the one who invited me. There's an essay I wrote about why theologians are having such trouble with prayer. So when you have these little chidushei Torah, he's talking to us as rabbis, these Chiddushei Torah, these innovations that you have come up with, it's not a bad interruption in the middle of davening. When people say, why doesn't God answer my prayer in the middle of davening, I have to remember these questions. I remember, for instance, that I owe somebody money and have to pay it back. That was God answering my prayer. Treat these things not like machshavot zerah, like foreign and alien thoughts, but have a piece of paper during the week and write it down. So many things will come to you if you say, I'm present, I'm positive, I feel invited. And I'll just go to a few more things. I believe we could find compatible colleagues with whom we could share how we want to restructure the synagogue in our day. And maybe the synagogue isn't the right word anymore. Just as Mordechai Kaplan of Shalom did in his day, he called it a community center, not a synagogue. More people in the world say they are spiritual but not religious. The Pew Report shows that many of these identify with being Jewish, and by that they mean cultural and ethnic identification. We have to find ways to serve them and to enhance and focus their spirituality. You're spiritual, good, but what's your spiritual practice? Not to challenge them, but to elicit. Pay attention to outreach, because there are so many people who identify with being Jewish without much content, and we need to find a way to connect with them. We have been so taught that teaching things about Yiddishkeit, you address the left hemisphere, but it doesn't work. There are things that touch and stimulate people's nonverbal unconscious, from deeply buried memories, special foods, melodies, and practices. A story. I lived in Fall River, Massachusetts, one of his early rabbinic posts. And Fegulas, Ronald Levracha, who was my wife then, made 120 kreplach. You don't know what a kreplach is? Kreplach is a singular. If you don't know, you should ask someone. It's very important. It is a sort of a
dumpling.
A Yiddish
Dumpling.
Right? The Yiddish is dough filled with beet soup. Okay. And there's a custom to make it before Yom Kippur. There's a connection between kreplach and Yom Kippur. So it was before Yom Kippur, and I had this little shul, and I had a number of people who were friends, so I went around from one to the other and left them some kreplach. It's a good chabad methodology, deep stuff. And I said this for the meal before Yom Kippur, so that you'll be able to fast better. The wife of one of these people told me later on that her husband had never fasted in Yom Kippur, but this year he fasted. He said, how could I not fast after I ate a kreplach? Find the means to expose people to what they're hungry for, their deep preconscious memories, that will instill in them a desire that will fill them with the Jewish endorphins. And what's a Jewish endorphin? There are some things that will help. Some people will say, I don't believe in God, but I do believe in And don't forget, he said, we are part of Klal Yisrael. Now more than ever, even when the Orthodox people are also chafing under the impression of the Haredim, we have many colleagues in Klal Yisrael whose ethos is much closer to ours. When you look above Reconstructionist, conservative, reform, and even modern Orthodoxy, they've adapted what he pointed out in worship and meditation and ritual. Ours, talking about Jewish renewal, he says, ours is the beta vision of what Klal Yisrael needs. And in the beta vision, the better version, not everything that's being tried is going to be finally adopted. But we have to continue to experiment, to experience, so that the things that come from the past, we can see how they can be updated and shaped. In this way, the past can service of the present and in the future. And when we realize that there are certain things that cannot be updated, and we open ourselves to the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, and ask ourselves what the future needs, then we learn to see in the presence what we need to create. There are some boundaries I cannot give my permission to cross. This is a very straightforward way he spoke with us. Not long ago, there was a conversation on our list about circumcision. Please remember, this is at the center of our covenant. Just as I don't want to move Shabbos to Wednesdays, I don't want to give up print. We cannot create things that are unable to be integrated into Klal Yisrael. The immune response of Klal Yisrael is going to be, if we go in this direction, that we are no longer part of Klal Yisrael. If we do these things, we must remember we are still members of the covenant. Again, this is a very short version of a very long talk. For me, the essential teaching I got from Rabbi Zalman is this: how to understand the four-letter name and the word Elohim. We're all getting back to the same thing. The four-letter name, of course, can be pronounced only by being truly alive and through breath. It has no formation. Yud Hey Vav Hey, the four-letter name, offers us opportunities of expansion, expansiveness. And then for me, what has struck me and been part of my life, and I really transfer this teaching on it here at TBZ again and again and again. Eloheinu has to be a verb and not a noun. Who gods us. That dynamism of that has inspired me for 40 years. It's what God answered Moshe when he said, Hey, yeah, Asher Hayeh, which is not to be translated, I am that I am. Right? That's Popeye. It's what I will be, forever what I will be, and the idea is that however you will be, I will be with you. Because if you're still observing your Jewish life or practicing your Judaism when you're 16, as if you were 6, and 60 as if you were 16, and you haven't developed and grown, you have basically missed an opportunity of having that dynamic God who guides us to be part of your life. For me, that's really been the essential teaching. And every one of Rabbi Zalman's students has taken something to be the essential teaching that guides them in their being a rabbi or being an academic, or however they manifest themselves. And certainly, we are grateful that there are thousands of Balabatim, not only professional Jews, who really, truly take this very seriously. We are pleased, Rosie, Zalman's daughter, Machia's grandson, Shalomi, Marcy, who he loved very much, and Mary, I'm glad you were able to make it. It's hard to lose a father, and I want you to know that many of us felt that we have lost a father as well. We share in your grief, but I also know Rabbi Zalman, as he told me 25 years ago when he asked me to make sure everybody laughed at his memorial service, he said, I don't want to be mourned. I don't want to be mourned. I want you to take the things that I've done in my life and celebrate them. More importantly, remember, the job of a student is to continue to transmit. And I wish all of you become familiar with Rabbi Zalman's teachings. All of you would realize that you were part of a link chain you have to transmit. You can't keep it. It has to go on and on and on. I'm going to ask you to rise as we will do the memorial prayer. And I'm going to ask Sapphira Linden to honor Rabbi Zalman's Schachter in the Sufist tradition. He was made as a Sufi sheikh. He was a student, not directly, but of Murshid Sam Lewis, who's one of the great early Sufis in this country. A nice Jewish boy, of course. And before we do the El Malay, I'm going to ask you to read a Sufi prayer.
Dearest Rabbi Zalman, toward the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance. O thou, the cause and effect of the whole universe, the source from whence we have come and the goal towards which all are bound, receive this soul, who is coming to thee into thy parental arms. May thy forgiving glance heal the heart. Lift him from the denseness of the earth. Surround him with the light of thine own spirit. Raise him up to heaven, which is the true dwelling place. We pray thee, grant him the blessing of thy most exalted presence. May his life upon earth become as a dream to his waking soul, and let his thirsting eyes behold the glorious vision of thy sonship.
Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Rabbi Zalman, Schachter, Shalomi, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful one, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace, and may his soul be bound up in the bond of life, and may he rest in peace. Let us say Amen. Rabbi Bonit Zalman sagt, und der Beter von Zalman für ganz Klal Yisrael, Amelet Yosher, stand and intercede for us before the throne of glory. This time of strife in the world, to trust that your influence will bring peace and tranquility to us all. There'll be light refreshment downstairs if you wish to mingle and talk about Rabbi Zalman. Please do us the favor, if you see pamphlets or papers, to pick them up, take a picture, or leave them on the back table, not to leave them lying around. Thank you all for coming.